we are again, second book. As I talked to you about the background already, it's a beautiful background with the sun and the clouds. Doesn't that just look inviting? I think it does. So now is the second book of Morgan and Me. All right, we just learned about how Morgan became to be a unicorn. It's written by Stephen Cosgrove and illustrated by Robin James. Again, this is a serendipity book. And you can see that. It's got a different kind of fair, Serendipity Press, and it's got a dedication, so I'm going to read that to you. It says, dedicated to Robin James and Morgan, her horse, who I hope will always live in the land of later. So let's see what this book is about. Do you ever lie on your back and gaze at the sky, wishing you were something other than you are? In a far corner of the land of later, there was a beautiful princess who always was dreaming of being someone other than herself. When her chores in the castle were to be done, she could be found lying on her back, dreaming of paupers, princesses, and dewdrops. Paupers means kind of friends, more like working or someone who maybe didn't have a lot of money back then. Someone who wasn't a princess or a king or a lord. All right. She would dream she was a pauper, for she was. She would dream she was a princess, for she was. And she would dream she was a dewdrop, but she really wasn't a dewdrop. One day, as she was watching the clouds puff and billow across the sky, her father shouted at her from her castle, "I've told you before to clean your room. Now I find you've done nothing all day but dream." "I'll be there in a minute," she shouted, but instead of minding her father, she decided to take a walk in the woods. "I don't need to clean up my room right now," she thought as she walked along the path. "I'll do it, but maybe just a bit later." She walked deeper, deeper into the forest. The trees made a beautiful canopy over her head. The moss at her feet felt like a velvet carpet. "I should go back before I get lost." "I'll go back, but just a little later." And she walked on and on into the forest. "I should find something to eat, for I'm so very hungry. I'll look for food." Oh, but just a little later. The forest became darker and the path became twisted and gnarled. Brambles were tearing at her clothing, but the little princess knew the path must be prettier up ahead. Besides, she could always turn around and go back later. And as she walked farther, the dark shadows began closing in around her. After what seemed hours and hours of walking, she saw a glimmer of sunlight streaking through the branches. "That must be a meadow," she said. With that, she hurried through the stickers and darkness to the sunlight ahead. Happily, she stepped into the clearing. What a beautiful meadow, she thought. There are flowers growing in every corner, and the clover. Just smell the clover. The princess was absolutely delighted. Never had she seen anything quite so beautiful. She was still hungry, and she knew she had to get home, but she could always do that later. She was having so much fun that she had run around the meadow nearly 4 times before she noticed a large shape leaning against a tree. She stopped and looked. Standing next to the tree was the largest unicorn she had ever seen. The princess was a little frightened. She'd always loved horses, zebras, giraffes, and a unicorn was much like a horse. Boldly, she walked right up to him and asked, "Why are you standing there, Mr. Unicorn?" Then she noticed that the unicorn's beautiful pearl horn was caught in a branch of the tree. "My name is Morgan," he said, "and if you have a moment, I will tell you my tale." It seems that Morgan's fun-loving and playful unicorn, day after day he would play tag with the bumblebees in the meadow. One day, as he was frisking about trying to catch a bumblebee, one landed right on his horn. And Morgan was shocked at having the bumblebee so close, and he looked up to see what it was doing. Now we all know that if we don't watch where we're going, we will run into something. And sure enough, Morgan ran right into the tree and stuck his unicorn into a branch. Desperately, the bumblebees gathered around and tried to set Morgan free, but it was to no avail, and Morgan was left all alone in the shadow of the tree, helplessly stuck. Morgan asked the little princess if she would free him, and if she would only help, Morgan promised to be hers for all of his days. The princess thought for a moment and said, "I'm sorry you got stuck in the tree, Morgan. I know I should help you, and I promise I will, but just a little bit later." That's not very friendly, is it? Thoughtlessly, the little princess played at her leisure, and when she was finally bored, she decided she would help Morgan. She found a very thorny rosebush and carefully broke off the branch, and gently she climbed up on Morgan's back, and using the rose branch as a saw, began to cut through the limb, and at last Morgan was free. Morgan was very grateful, even if the little princess had taken her time. Morgan followed her obediently through the clover. The little princess was having so much fun that she didn't see the lily pond in the middle of the meadow, and slipping on her back, she fell headlong into the water. Coughing and sputtering, she crawled onto a lily pad and called for Morgan to help her. Morgan tossed his mane, and he smiled a wise smile and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you fell into the pond, Princess. I know I should help you, and, well, I will, but just a little later." "But I'll catch a cold sitting on this lily pad," said the princess. "Won't you please help me now?" Sadly, the princess thought for a moment. Then she remembered all the times that her father had asked her to clean her room, and she had always put it off until later. She even knew how Morgan must have felt when she told him that she would only help him, but later. With a tear in her eye and a lump in her throat, she said, "Morgan, I'm sorry for always living in the land of later. Please help me. I promise always to do what I should do and have it done now instead of just a little later." Morgan nodded his head and slowly lowered his great horn so that the princess could climb from the water. Then and forever after, Morgan and the little princess were the closest of close friends. Now, when the princess and Morgan have finished all their chores, they lie upon the grass and dream of being something other than what they are. They dream of poppers, princess, and dewdrops, and sometimes, just so he won't scare anybody, Morgan removes his horn so that he can be with her. I hope you enjoyed that. Friends, I wanted to show you at the end, they have a little picture of the two authors, or the author and the illustrator. And it says, this is Robin James and Stephen Cosgrove. And they're with a big stuffed animal you can see called the Weedle. And I will actually be reading the Weedle in a couple of weeks. So I hope you enjoyed those, friends. And I will see you next week. Bye!